Hello chess friends and welcome to Out of Chess channel and welcome back to the Tata Steel Masters in 2022. So we're now already in the round 9 of the super event and we're following now the derby of the day, which is of course the match game between Magnus Carlsen and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. Both of them had, of course, a comfortable lead because both of them had, after 8 rounds, 5.5 points. Now, who wins this game, I think, will be even the winner of the super event because I don't think that anyone catch up. Maybe Vidit, Santosh, Gujrathi, who has, of course, 5 points. But that's, of course, also something that we'll discuss in the later stage of the tournament. But now, let's see the derby of the day. So, as I said, Magnus Carlsen versus Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. So, Magnus opened with the move d4. We have knight to f6 by Shakhriyar. We have knight to f3. And after d5 we have c4. The queen's gambit is on the board, and here after move e6 we have the queen's gambit declined. And again, I'm pointing out, you could play knight to c3, you could play the classical systems, but again Magnus chooses to play the sharper line. He's playing now the so-called Catalan opening, and the Catalan is really sharp because we have already an asymmetrical pawn structure after d takes c4. And again, I'm pointing out, I've pointed it out also in our previous analysis, the problem always for white in the Catalan is after d takes c4, okay, you have your pawn central control, but you lose always 2 tempi in order to get your pawn back. So you can do it with queen to a4, but then you lose another tempo by taking out the pawn. So even with knight to a3, knight to c4, the same thing happens. So the problem is always the lack of time, sort of, that you have to take in order to just recapture the pawn. And then, as I also mentioned before, meanwhile black is doing something, meanwhile black is developing the minor pieces. So we have bishop to g2, bishop to b4, bishop to d2 by Magnus Carlsen, and now we have a5. A5 is very important because, of course, what black wants to get here is after bishop to b4, a takes b4, this flexible pawn structure which can be supported, of course, for instance, with the move b5, also with c5 you can break through. Okay, maybe white could choose to play here maybe sort of a move knight to e5, but now simple Carlsen, I think, works here for black. After knight to c4, here knight to c6 is perfectly fine because I'm not sure if white is going to really ever give up this light square bishop for the knight on c6. And you see the knight is the supporter of this very annoying pawn on b4. So this will be a line, I think, in which black is perfectly fine. So here after move Carlsen was played by Magnus Carlsen, and here, for instance, if Shakhriyar Mamedyarov now takes, we have, for instance, the possibility. The problem is now, even after if you try b5, the problem is now you get this stunner, queen to g5. I think simply wins the game immediately. So the problem is not this move knight to e5, which could liberate the long diagonal. The problem is queen to g5. So you cannot really support your c4 pawn with the move b5. If you castle, of course, then we simply take out the pawn on b5, and also then afterwards knight to e5 is a beautiful possibility. So these are the tiny little tactics in the Catalan. So taking also here bishop to d2 is not a good option here immediately for black because you have to first secure the king by castling. This is what Shakhriyar Mamedyarov played simply kingside castling, and we have now e3. Magnus Carlsen fixes the pawn structure because he wants to liberate his knight a little bit. He wants to play knight to e5, and then, of course, if you play that, then the d4 pawn is hanging. So rook to a6. Shakhriyar Mamedyarov gets out of the potential range of the bishop because the bishop is very dangerous. So what Shakhriyar Mamedyarov is trying to play is a potential b5 move. Then the pawn structure would be cemented, and then with this 3 versus 2 situation, we would have 3 connected pawns versus these 2 pawns on the queen side. Then black could have a comfortable game. So queen to c2, we have b5, we have a4 here by Magnus Carlsen. Very important move to split the pawn chain because you don't want to do this. Of course, b takes a4, then we can take out this one, then this one is weak, then also the a5 is weak, then also the c7 weak. So it's a really huge problem. So this idea is to simply split the pawn chain. Of course, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov didn't take. He played simply normal c6 move. He's hoping now that Magnus takes, a takes b5, and now after potential c takes b5, he could have, of course, this powerful 3 connected pawns on the queen side. But okay, Magnus Carlsen is, of course, not taking. He's playing normal developing move, knight to c3, and we have now rook to b6. We have e4 by Magnus. He is getting use of his pawn central control, which we always get in the Catalan. We can notice now that white white is here a dominant position in center, but black is a dominant position on the queen side. So after move e4, now comes, I think, the critical moment of this game. Here Mamedyarov has the opportunity, for instance, to play some moves like h6, then after e5 we could play here knight to d5, and this would be, I think, a perfect position for black. Black has cemented the position in the center of the board, and here I think black does have worries. But here Shakhriyar Mamedyarov played now the move bishop to e7, and the problem about this move bishop to e7 is that you have left your protection of the a5 square. You could also play, I think, in this position rook to b7. You have to get off simply out of the range of the potential range here of the bishop. If bishop takes on a5, then you see the rook is on the dark square diagonal, and also the queen is on the dark square diagonal, and that was now a huge problem for Mamedyarov. He played bishop to e7. Magnus played now this move e5, and again Mamedyarov tried to cement the position around the square d5, but it's now a different position because Magnus has now the opportunity to take. We have a takes b5, c takes b5, knight takes b5. Here, of course, if you take queen to b5, then you get this one, knight to g5, comes with a direct checkmate threat, and also with a direct threat to take out the queen. So it's, of course, game over here for black. So you have to take here with the pawn, but now comes the problem, bishop to a5, and from this point on white is much better. You see the problems about this move bishop to e7, really beautiful tactics here in the middle game stage, but this was, I think, a huge blunder by Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. Of course, it's not a position that is losing immediately, because still black can rely here on this 2 versus 1 pawn majority, but from this point on Magnus has a comfortable game. So knight to c6, bishop takes b6, queen to b6, rook to a8, and then again a new mistake here by Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, h6. And you see now what's the problem. Okay, let's see now this particular continuation. You could maybe try knight to d4, but it's actually not working. You cannot take the centralized pawn. Magnus calculated this very well. Knight to d4, queen to d4, and now after rook to d1, the queen is hanging, and white simply picks up the pawn here with rook to d5, bishop to d5. Every move is perfectly fine. But here, if you could maybe play a better move, it's, I think, bishop to e6. You have to simply include your bishop into the game, because after potential rook to f8, we have bishop to f8, and now white is pretty much forced here to defend the d4 pawn. And now with the move queen to a7, or here with the move b4, black could make some kind of a progress here. At least black is some kind of a counterplay on the queen side. But now after move h6, the problem is now that Magnus Carlsen connect his rooks. That's the most important thing here. Magnus plays now the move rook to a1. We have seen knight to d4 is not working because of this tactics, rook to d1. So knight to d4, then rook to d1. You lose the d5 pawn, and now Shakhriyar Mamedyarov tried to simplify the game. He lost the tempo. He played the move bishop to e6 a little bit too late. It gives now here Magnus Carlsen the opportunity to play queen to d1, protect the pawn, and now b4. But b4 is, of course, not working, because here b3 stops the whole progress on the queen side. And what should you do? If you take, of course, then you don't have any more these pawns connected. Okay, maybe you have this position like this, but these are weak pawns now in the continuation, and I think white can pick them up very easily. So after b3 potential, here Shakhriyar Mamedyarov played the move c3, and we have now rook to a6. Very important move by Magnus Carlsen, deflecting finally the queen from the attack of the d4 pawn. Here queen to c7, and now it gives here Magnus Carlsen time to get the knight back into the game. And now with knight to c2, Magnus can play sort of a blockade, will never ever allow this pawn to get advanced on c2. But now what Magnus is hoping for is here, of course, this kind of an attack, f4, f5, which could, of course, attack the bishop. Then even f6 is dangerous, because the rook is here connected to the 6th rank. So many beautiful opportunities. That was only important because the queen is not attacking anymore the backward pawn on d4. So here Shakhriyar Mamedyarov tried to spice up the game. f6 is a huge mistake again, because Magnus found now a beautiful move, and with the move f6, you see the bishop on e6 is a little bit loose. Magnus includes now here the knight into the game. We have e takes f6, but now knight to e5, knight takes e5, and here Magnus picks up simply the bishop, rook to e6, and here Shakhriyar Mamedyarov tried to play c2, but now after move queen to e1 in this position, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov resigned, because because both pieces are hanging, the bishop and the knight are hanging. You can play maybe knight to d3, but the easiest way I think here to win the game is simply to take. Rook takes e7. You can maybe take out this one, but we can play bishop to d5, and now when you deflect the queen here, you can take rook to c7. The knight is hanging, we'll pick up simply this pawn, and from this point on it's a completely winning game here for Magnus Carlsen. So as I said, after a move, let's go back, queen to e1 in this position. Shakhriyar Mamedyarov resigned, which means now that Magnus Carlsen is now sole leader in this very important tournament. Magnus has now a whole point in front of Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, so the only player who can catch up now with Magnus Carlsen is of course Vidit. Santosh Gujrathi will cover his game maybe also in the continuation of the evening. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more games from this event, check out my coverage so far with some many great games that we have analyzed before. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.